Hello and welcome to the Dice Tower. I'm Wendy Yi.
I'm Chris Yi.
And today we're going to be reviewing Weather Machine by Vital Lacerda.
Famed designer, graphic design by Ian O'Toole as normal, from Eagle Gryphon Games, one of the big box games as you can tell. Fantastic cover, very intriguing theme. I was very excited about this one coming out. And so Vital Lacerda is known for making very heavy, very crunchy, thinky games.
That he is. Very crunchy, thinky, but also he usually ties them quite intensely to their theme. So we'll see what this plays like.
All right, we'll show you, and then we'll give you our thoughts.
In Weather Machine, we are scientists who are trying to help Latif fix his weather machine. However, he often gets in the way and messes stuff up. The main sections of the board are these 4 worker placement sections. We have supply, we have government, we have lab and R&D. And so what we're going to be doing is we are going to be collecting supplies, collecting robots, and trying to do research with these little tiles over here and eventually fix the weather machine and run it to protect the world from bad weather. This board over here explains the basic turn structure. So what you're going to do is you can perform one of these things on the left over here, flip them over, or spend them for extra bonuses. You then place your worker, you spend any vouchers that are needed for those action spaces that you go to, and then if you've received any books during that turn, you can then place them at the end. Sometimes there'll be rewards and bonuses for underneath. After players have taken all of their turns, then we move to step B of the round, and this is where the weather machine will run. The weather machine runs by wherever this little robot is at. He will check to see if the particular type of weather has an experiment up here. If it does, and if there are robots completely filling the column that it's in, then it will go ahead and run. Players will get points based on how many robots they have there and how many victory points are on that weather tile, and then they will also get one of these one-time bonuses over here. They will also get one of these research books, will then go in their little waiting area, and they can place permanently later. This tile then goes away, and a new tile fills its place, and the robot moves to the right. After the weather machine has run, we will then come over here to the C spot to see if Latif made it back to his nice little income area. First, we'll update turn order based on whether or not people have spent supplies. To change turn order, if so, we'll just rotate and make it match whatever's showing in the supply area, but then we'll gain income. Income comes on these player boards over here. Any space that has been unlocked by the robots will give you one of those things. There can be vouchers, they can be supplies, some gears, and such. While I'm over here, let me go explain a couple other things on this board. So we do have the inactive robots on the left. You have your little endgame scoring down here, your vouchers up here, your research books as you collect them, and then your storage over here. Anything that you gain throughout the game has to be able to fit in your storage area. If it does not, you just lose it. Let's talk about these worker placement spaces. There's quite a bit going on over here, and so let me explain generally what's going to happen. So whatever the icon is in this area is the voucher that you need to spend to be able to go to that location, and then depending on whether you're spending for the left action or the right action will then determine how many of those vouchers you need to spend. When you come to a location, you also gain a benefit in another voucher. So this one will give you the lab voucher bonuses, as well as any bonus that you may get if someone else is already in the location on the left side of you. So if I place my worker here, I get an additional lab bonus for him being here, as well as, because it's Latif, I get an extra wild science voucher. Now, when I come to an area where Latif is, he doesn't want to be there anymore because I'm fixing stuff. So he moves over to the next available location, and he will then mess stuff up over there. Now that I've come here, if I come to the left space, if you see there's a little and sign there, that means that I can take both actions. But I don't get that extra bonus of having someone there with me. Whereas if I take one of these darker spaces on the right, I can only take one of the 2 actions, but I get all these extra bonuses. For just a brief moment, I'm going to explain how these action spaces work. When you come over here to the government side of things, you're going to be gaining these little tiles. What you need to do is you need to spend a robot, and you need to spend a gear that matches whatever column you're trying to gain. So a pink gear right there. Spend a robot. You gain the tile underneath it, and that goes in your little active waiting area. And then wherever that spot was, whatever that tile was that you replaced, you then gain, and you can spend that at the beginning of a future turn as a future action or a future bonus. Now, if you want to take the right side of this government track, instead what you're going to do is you are going to flip over one of these tiles after spending your double vouchers. And then you're going to gain a voucher of the column and the row, the row that it is in. Now these two worker placement locations kind of work in tandem because you have to do some stuff on the left of both before you can do stuff on the right of both. So I'll just kind of explain the sequence of how it works. So on the left side over here of the research track, you're going to be adding robots out to this weather area. And as you do so, you will move up on the track, you'll place a robot, you'll spend the chemical, and then eventually you're hoping to have the weather run, and as it runs, then you'll gain the book, you'll gain whatever benefits are over here on this running track. But that doesn't happen till the end of the round. Then over here on the R&D track, what you're going to do is you're going to spend your vouchers, you're going to move up on the track up top, you then place your robots on a particular area, and then you spend whatever chemicals are to the left of it. If there's another cost to the right, you also have to spend that as well. However, the chemicals stay out. The requirements on the right do not stay out permanently. And then you gain a book of whatever area you're in. So this would be gaining a wind book. You put it in your little storage area until the end of the round, where you'll place it in whatever row it goes in. Once you have 3 different research books of the same type in a row, you can then come to this action over here in the lab. Those equal books let you push this little white disc, to the right, gaining any benefits that are underneath it. You then unlock that particular type of research. It can now be cited, which basically means that you can fill in these rows more easily with cited work. And then you collect any victory points based on what type of books you had in this row. And you gain one of these nice little tiles, which is also shown right here. Once you have a yellow disc unlocked, this means that you've done enough research that you can actually fix one of the weather machine parts and fix some weather problems that are going on. So you take this action over here in R&D, you check, yes, I do have all of the books available. I have one of these discs. So you then take the disc and you'll run it in that particular type of weather. So you'll place it up here. You place it on whatever one of these you want, points, gears, whatever, and then you can have to spend some gears. So if there's any open spaces where robots are not at, you will spend gears for those, as well as any gears that are showing up here at the top. Those are completely mandatory. Now, in addition, you can spend gears based on what's underneath these workers. If I am yellow and I'm trying to run this, I would want to spend green gears to get myself 2 extra points per gear. And if I wanted to prevent purple from gaining points, then I would go ahead and spend a blue gear and they would not be able to earn those points. Now there's a lot more to the game, but basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be moving around all these boards, trying to get as much research as you possibly can, laying out robots, running the weather machine, gaining government research and all that kind of stuff, so that eventually once these tiles run out and the weather machine has been run enough times, the game will end. All right, Chris, so going into this, we were both very excited. I was. I like this theme. I like this kind of steampunk-ish setting. I really like the cover. I really like the artwork. I saw a picture of the components for the first time. I thought, ooh, that's expansive. It's large. It's a big board. It's a lot of little pieces all over the place. Now, to give context, 2 of my favorite Lacerda games, and this is kind of funny, one of them is his lightest, or what many people regard to be his lightest big box game, which is Escape Plan. My other favorite is one that people consider to be one of his trickiest and thinkiest, and that's On Mars. Whereas my most favorite ones are his cooperative one, CO2, and then Lisboa, which is another pretty big one. So we enjoy definitely many of his games. I don't love Lisboa and stuff, right? One of the things that he does well is that he always thinks about the theme and puts that kind of front and center. Unfortunately for me, on this one, I didn't feel the theme. I think what the problem was with this is that all of his themes have been very grounded in reality, and this particular one was not. We don't have weather machines. We don't have specific details that are a part of a weather machine lore even that he can really pull from. But instead, this is a very abstract concept. And so oftentimes his mechanisms are very, very specifically related to whatever the theme is. Like in Kanban, there's this idea of just-in-time manufacturing. And so everything is very tight and clean, the way that parts come out and those kind of stuff, the way that Sandra comes along and cleans stuff up after you all the time, constantly removing all those extra cubes. That stuff is very tight, but because it's so tied to the theme, I get why it's there and I appreciate it. But I think that there's so much tightness going on in Weather Machine that I feel is for the sake of tightness, not because of the theme, and therefore it makes it harder to teach.
It makes it harder to teach. It makes it harder to remember some of the specifics because there are 4 main worker placement sections of the board. Mm-hmm. Each of them behaves differently, very similarly, but has exceptions to it. I generally like this structure. Many people say that this has some similarities to Kanban.
It has a lot of that feel. Because
there's limited worker placement spots. You have one worker that you're placing around. There's an incentive to be there first. There's a counter incentive to be there second. And I like that dynamic a lot.
And there's a computer player kind of moving around too, blocking spaces and doing stuff to those areas.
Professor Latif, not a computer player, it's just, it represents him kind of going around. It represents him
moving. I say computer player.
Right, it's kind of like Sandra from Kanban if you play it. You're not administering a whole player.
Yes.
With the exception of, and here's one of the problems I have with the game, is I'm going to have to say that phrase a lot, with the exception of, right? He doesn't feel like operating another player. With the exception of a 2-player game, where 2 of the locations he'll go to and start removing some of the research tiles, I think to kind of simulate having more players there.
Yes, because I think that, so he's in the regular game as a simulation of he's messing stuff up and he's just kind of undoing the work you're doing because he's trying to be helpful. But yeah, that's my guess, but in that 2-player game, there are extra rules, and those rules change. So you mentioned accept. He moves around, and at 2 of the 3 main actions that you do, he does the same thing, but then there's an exception for the 3rd one. And we see that constantly throughout this game. There are tracks that you're moving up on as you take those actions. You get whatever is in that space when you trigger that track, and you can get the benefits from it underneath it. Some of them you get the benefits directly under you. Some you get the one under you and all the ones before. There's these rules, but then there's always these exceptions.
One of the 3 tracks, you can activate the other 2 tracks as if you were further than where you were. I like all of that in isolation.
Yes.
I like the fact that each spot has the 2 actions. You can pay for the vouchers and do either one, and they all are extremely similar. One action on the left-hand side is almost the same on all of them. But with exceptions. Sometimes you grab the research tiles right away, other ones you have to wait. And the thing is, you start piling up all of these exceptions, and then you pile it onto your earlier point of that it's not grounded in a theme that I can use to teach or use to remember these exceptions. And now it's becoming a lot of overhead and labor on my mind just trying to play the game by the rules.
And so that it makes it so much more clutchy than I feel like a lot of his other games. I feel like it takes away that smoothness of being able to really enjoy the strategy, and instead I'm trying to remember which machine has books remove at what point and when do those robots come out. And usually we're fine with a lot of that stuff. We just want to make that point that this is more than typical for a Lacerda game. This is more than in a lot of the other games that we absolutely love of his. So let's talk about something that we do enjoy. Mm-hmm. I do enjoy the puzzle of it. I enjoy that even though there are only 4 real action spots, and each action spot has a couple possibilities that you can do, a lot of those you have to really be in place to be able to perform them. So the left side of every action space is something that you can almost do anytime. You can go there, you can put a robot out, you can kind of help run that weather machine, or you can throw some robots out on a different spot and do something else, and you can collect some resources or some sort of bonus tile token. There's those 3 basic things that you can kind of do anytime, and then you can always get resources. But
you're going to have to do that supply action if you don't have the robots. And so there's always that default spot to kind of go back to, the number 1 on the bottom.
But then I also like the kind of the upgraded side or the more expensive side of the actions where you can publish research and you can actually run the prototype, I think. the far right side.
Yes.
You can run the prototype.
And fight the bad weather tile.
Yes. So I like that those are the ultimate goal and you're working towards them as you're doing all the other little things so that you can eventually get there and run. So I appreciate that there's not like 8 or 9 different locations, that there's just the 4. I think that that's cool, and I think that that creates a fun puzzle.
I agree. And that's why I said I like that general structure to it. It's the nitty-gritty, it is the exceptions, these two, first actions are so similar, but you have to remember this one you need to do this extra little thing to it. Remember that this one you don't get the book right away, and the research tiles and stuff. Mm-hmm. There are aspects of theme, I think, well integrated into it. There are aspects where, okay, the government track gives you these subsidies and whatnot. I understand that there is theme kind of cooked in there. I think one of the things we're talking about is kind of the larger theme, right? One of the things I do find very thematic that I like is the mechanism of using someone else's publications, citing sources in an academic setting. I really like that mechanism, both thematically and as something to do in the game. You're locked out of one of those research types of one of the 3 that you need, cite your sources somewhere else, and you can plug that hole. And then you can carry through with the action where you needed all 3 in a row. That's good. I really do like that. There's aspects of this game I like a lot. I ultimately just come away, though, with more complaints than praise, I think. Okay.
Do you have any other complaints or praise that you'd like to add?
I seldom say this. With this line of games, I think that it oftentimes has immaculate art and graphic design and very thorough production. I do have a major complaint, though, in that for the smaller complaint is that the player aid, which is thorough and good, doesn't have all the 2-player rule exceptions in there.
Which I think that added to our frustration while playing the 2-player round, is we kept having to pull out the rule book and say, okay, Latif moved to the weather machine. Now what does he do? Let me reopen up the rule book.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree with that.
There's general stuff, and then you have to flip 8 pages back and find hey, here's the 2-player part. That could have been done better. That's minor. The major... Sorry.
I was going to say, my big one for the graphic design is the weather machine, that middle area, has gears in the picture, and we spent like 15 minutes trying to figure out why the heck there were gears there, and ultimately online they said, oh, just for flavor.
They're decorative.
Decorative. Yeah, but they actually mean something on a different worker placement space, and that, to me, is a problem. That I should not have had to spend 15 minutes to figure out when I spent gears on the little gear thing.
I don't understand how this one snuck through. I mean, yeah. I was teaching the rules to Wendy. I'd spent a long time learning this. I thought I had it down pat. And you never will, perfect. And that's fine, right? Teaching it, she goes, why are those gears there? Right? You taught me why they're here. Why are they here? And I did not have an answer.
Yeah.
The rule book did not have an answer. Having to go online is... Look, it happens this day and age, but that was something that should have been caught. And yet, that is something that you'll get past. But that's a useful, actual in-game icon that is on a spot. That would be like playing any other game, and you say, hey, why does this have the symbol right here that says draw 3 cards? That's decorative! I don't complain about that lightly. That is a huge problem for me.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Not a fan of that particular issue.
Right. So there's many hands, there's many eyes that should have caught that along the process. I'm not blaming an individual person, but yes. it should have been caught.
I'm also not a fan of the upgraded gears. I don't feel like the colors match the original colors. They are colored metal, and that often doesn't turn out well, and therefore I often don't like it in games.
See Red Rising.
Yeah. Speaking of red, it's the red and the pink/brown color. It's murky.
Yeah, that's an upgraded component.
Yep.
I might honestly play with the cardboard ones.
I will.
So, we've complained a lot. We do have things that we like about it. The puzzle is in many ways satisfying and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Let's go to final thoughts and scoring.
Okay, so my final thoughts is I still enjoy the game in spite of a lot of what's going on, but I don't enjoy it as much as any of his other games. And I think that is a sad sign because I very much enjoy a lot of Lacerda games. And so the inelegancies of the theme, just contradicting the mechanisms that are going on, all the exceptions to the rules so that it's not clear that's another design decision, that if they had made more clear the aspects that were the exceptions to the rules, then I think that would help visually. And ultimately, there were a lot of times that I felt like, why is this a rule? Why is this a requirement? I am all for tight games. I am all for heavy games, but I want to have a reason why something is super tight. Why do I have to take those chemicals and put them on a specific colored space, but that specific colored space is determined by a lineup of tiles, and I have to have 2 of the exact same colored tiles to put those together so that I can put a red chemical there. But by the time I get all that, I no longer need red chemicals. I now need green chemicals because I'm working on something entirely different. And so there's a lot of that stuff going on that I think, why is this a rule? Why do we have this exception? Why do we have this requirement? And if it was grounded in a theme and I understood that, I'd be so much happier. So at the end of the day, I realized I didn't give my score yet. I'm going to give this a 6. There's so many other of his games that I would much rather play at the end of the day. And so sadly, this didn't make it to my recommendations. I was super excited about it. But I think that, we'll give it another try the next one that comes out.
Yeah, I am not turned off from playing more of games in this line because I think there are more ones that I enjoy, generally speaking, than I dislike. Mm-hmm. I'm giving this one a 4. I cannot recommend it. And not only can I not recommend it, I would, if people ask me, hey, should I try this one? I don't know. I don't think so, right? That's what I mean by a 4. I think that it has tightness for the sake of tightness. There are certain things like you can store these chemicals by matching these halves. It didn't need to be there. There's a lot of stuff that I feel like could have been fat trimmed off. The act of running the weather machine is not that interesting because it requires a lot of help. Now, I will frame this. My 4 is also particularly because I don't think this is a 2-player game. I don't think it has extra rules upkeep that you have to remember and you have to look up. There is an element of working together to actually successfully run the weather machine.
Yes.
That doesn't scale by player count. And so I think 2-player is probably the worst player count for this, but also it's a long and thinky game, so more players will add more time, but it will add more interesting points of interaction. I have not particularly enjoyed my 2-player plays of this. I think that there are some... I think that it could have been more streamlined, sure, but that's his design philosophy. I get that. So maybe not even that. I think my biggest complaint is I didn't have fun. I didn't have fun running the weather machine when we actually colluded enough to make something fire off and we say, woof, what do we get? 4 points and a gear. That wasn't that exciting.
2 gears.
Right? Or... okay, now that that's run, we can go ahead and what happens when you run the weather machine? You add a bad weather tile over to the bad weather stack. Okay, what happens when we work together and we fight off that bad weather stack? You can earn like 6, 7, 8 points. Oh, so nothing exciting happens. This is a cool theme, this is a cool world, and it doesn't live up to it for me. So I'm actively not recommending it. It's a 4 for me. It's immaculately designed in so many ways. I can recognize how good and how thoughtful it is. That's not going to change my score. I'm not going to give this a higher score because it's a good, it's objectively a balanced design and all that stuff. I'm saying it's a 4 because I didn't have fun. So that's my thoughts on Weather Machine.
There you go. Well, thanks for joining us today. If this still sounds interesting to you, pick it up and enjoy it. Otherwise, there's plenty other Lacerda games out there for you to try.
Yeah, and many people I know have enjoyed this. And so take my words with a grain or two of salt. Check with your friends who do enjoy it. But we have to say what we feel about it.
I'm Wendy Yi.
I'm Chris Yi.
Have a great time thinking about thinky stuff.
Here comes the storm.